Monsieur le vice-président exécutif.
Executive Vice President, dear Raffaele Fitto, dear friends, European Commissioners, dear Christoph Hansen, Kostas Kadis, and of course, my dear Apostolos Titsikostas, we have fought many fights together for the regions. French ministers, Benjamin Haddad, and the Spanish and Portuguese ministers, ladies and gentlemen, presidents of the regions, dear parliamentarians, the presence here today of a number of European commissioners is unprecedented, and it underscores the deeply cross-cutting nature of this forum for outermost regions. This is an excellent thing, because it does really reflect the state of mind behind Article 349 of the treaty, which forms the basis for all of our actions. This is a cross-cutting article. It applies for all of the Union's sectoral policies and must, of course, underpin all of our action and all of that of the European Commission and the parliamentary committees in the European Parliament as well. And I would like very much to thank and welcome the commitment of the Executive Vice President to ensure that this forum has a cross-cutting nature. As you know, Vice Presidents, we have often said that this forum is for us a space for dialogue which we deem to be essential between the European Commission and the European institutions and the European Parliament in particular, and the outermost regions, as well as the Member States. The organisation of this shows the Commission's respect for the most outermost regions, and these discussions are for the European Parliament extremely important as well. Vice President, I would also like to thank you for having stuck to your commitments when it comes to the very specific timeline and the direction which you have set for us, where in April there will be a new outermost region strategy, and by October the legislative machinery will be underway, the European Omnibus that is, to adapt the regulation and directives for the outermost regions. These two files have a lot of expectations contained within them to breathe new life into the implementation of Article 349. And yesterday you also, before the arrival of the presidents of the outermost regions in Brussels, launched a call for evidence for the outermost regions. And of course, the European Parliament very much welcomes all of this. We now all need to be ready to commit ourselves to this work. First of all, I would like to say that this forum for the outermost regions and the strategy for the ORs, quite apart from the problems which we are aware of, must also be an opportunity for us to renew our approach when it comes to the outermost regions, and sometimes move away from a somewhat pessimistic vision so that we are able as well to seize new opportunities in a new world which is coming into being before our very eyes, a new geopolitical situation. Even though we may not know which direction it's going to move in, we must nonetheless try to see what we can gain from all this in positive terms. And in this geopolitical situation, the European Union's outermost regions play a strategic role, which, to be frank, we have often underestimated, and that includes us from the outermost regions. But we can no longer ignore this. The outermost regions, as we were saying with Presidents Bello and Vice President Adil from Réunion, are not on the margins of Europe. They are life forces and borders of the European Union in three oceans. They are our presence in the Atlantic, Indian Oceans and the Caribbean. And they are our outposts, Commissioner Titikostas, with the sea routes. They are our climate sentinels, our territories for innovation and natural partners in this important Africa, India, Pacific axis and the Union strategy there. Commissioners Cadiz and Titikostas, you have 9 presidents of outermost regions here before you today, and these are essential in all of your policies, perhaps to give them a whole new dimension, which can confer upon your actions a global dimension which is immeasurable. So, we all agree upon the importance of the outermost regions, but we are worried. And there is deep disquiet within our regions as well about the continuation of a number of instruments, and I feel as though the main concern of the European Parliament and of the presidents in the regions is about the future multi-annual financial framework. On behalf of the European Parliament and President Roberta Metsola, I would like to say that the European Parliament is strongly mobilized and has been working over recent months for all of the regions in Europe and for all of the outermost regions. We are hard at work as co-legislator, which is the Parliament's role, to improve the Commission's proposal. And this is quite normal, of course. In all the negotiations on the MFF, the same thing does happen. But I hope that, as ever, we will fall on our feet this time round as well. We do remember the previous negotiations. The last negotiations were particularly worrisome at the beginning. The UK was leaving the EU with its 50 billion budget was being lost, and then there was the COVID crisis, the war in Ukraine, and we overcame all of it. And I hope that the meetings with President von der Leyen and with the President of the European Parliament have been, and I think they were, very useful. President von der Leyen has already decided to amend some of the elements of the proposal to better include the regional levels within the management of the funds and when defining the programs. What President von der Leyen has suggested and proposed is a step forward, but the Parliament and the outermost region MEPs and the representatives of the ORs are now working hard on amendments to protect the ORs more and reflect their specificities under Article 349. The cohesion policy is surely the most important policy for outermost regions now. And this policy must, of course, continue to be a regional one. The governance will certainly change, but it must not lead to it being watered down, because the aim of the cohesion policy is to reduce regional disparities. And this is an objective which must be maintained, which is why we want to see the envelopes allocated to each outermost region being held at least to the same amount as for the 2021-2027 programming period. And in the Commission's proposal, there is already a security net, as you were saying, to guarantee the least developed regions ensuring that they are the least impacted by any cuts. And we have already discussed this, Mr. Executive Vice President, and I hope that we will be able to continue to work with all of the commissioners to support this. Another issue of concern for the presidents of the outermost regions and the European Parliament is, of course, that of POSEI. This is the emblematic and vital instrument which the outermost regions have and it is based, again, on Article 349. If this programme were to change and evolve, we would call for such changes happening, Commissioner Hansen, through the current regulation. In any case, once again, the European Parliament, in this case too, is prepared to amend any proposal from the European Commission. Article 349 is not a concession made to us. It is something which was decided upon when the treaty was drafted. It is an article at the highest level of our rules and norms, and of course we must guarantee that it is fully implemented. But the question of the MFF is not the only question. It is just a part of European policy. And there are many other European regulations and directives. And we have always observed that all too often these directives and regulations are not appropriate. And it is this inappropriate nature of many of the norms which is so essential. They need to be adapted to our island and maritime realities. Commissioner, I thank you for making this issue a priority. We stand at your side to breathe new life into the implementation of Article 349. To at least attempt to resolve the legislative issues which are arising in a number of the regulations. And of course, we are thinking of a legislative vehicle which can allow us to make corrections to the rules throughout sectoral policies, a European Omnibus, in other words. And I would like to thank the French government, which has called for regulatory amendments which are very specific in nature, and I hope that the Portuguese and Spanish governments will follow suit very soon. I think that this would be an unprecedented step forward in the relationship between the European Commission and the outermost regions, if, during this mandate, we can manage to adopt this European Omnibus for the outermost regions. And in any case, the European Parliament, once again, is ready to play its role. To conclude, my dear colleagues, I would like to stress very much, Commissioner, the issue of fisheries. We have already discussed this at length. We have waited all too long, and now it is time to implement. It's not time to make decisions. The decisions are already made. It's now time to implement those decisions. And once again, I hope that the legislative machinery and other announcements will very soon allow for a definitive resolution to the problem of the renewal of fishing fleets in our regions. To conclude, I wish to say that the islands really are not small. Islands are countries which are far more vast than the landlocked European ones are. We have visions of an infinite space from our islands. We are open to the oceans, which are the new horizon for development today for all countries. Of course, we have the blue economy, marine research, biotechnology, renewable energy from the seas, the seabed, maritime surveillance, sea routes, all of that, which is why the outermost regions must be at the heart of the Ocean Pact, but also be at the heart of proposals from the European Commission for the adaptation plan to climate change and to global warming, because as we know, island regions are facing real vulnerabilities in this field. As I have already said, outermost regions are major strategic boons for the European Union in the 21st century. Which is why we so strongly believe that the global gateway simply could not ignore the outermost regions and territories, because the strategic investments, whether this be in the Caribbean, the Pacific or the Indian Ocean, with third countries, must, of course, include our regions. And I'm thinking of undersea cables, just that example. There are projects underway with third country partners, but they must, of course, include the outermost regions. And I welcome very much the fact that the President of the European Commission, President van der Leyen, has decided to open up eligibility of the Global Gateway to the outermost regions and countries and territories. This is a real opportunity for them, for us. So, the European Parliament is hard at work. We are being demanding and constructive in our work to the European Commission. The European Parliament is listening to the regions. Our work is just beginning, but I'm extremely optimistic, and I fully believe that this forum stands as the launch of new opportunities for all of the outermost regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Vice President Ormajee.